Late in 1944, Germany was losing on both fronts. After Kursk, the Red Army kept moving west into Poland. In June 1944, Allied troops landed in Normandy and pushed through France. SS officials knew their crimes would soon be exposed. About 90 kilometers north of Berlin, Ravensbrück answered with a gas chamber beside the crematorium. It was smaller than Auschwitz-Birkenau. It was enough. By the time the Red Army liberated Auschwitz on January 27, 1945, this chamber was already working. Guards pulled more women from the barracks, lined them up, and widened the selections. Dorothea Binz took part. The route was direct. Women stood for inspection while guards moved down the line and decided. Sometimes visible illness marked them out. Sometimes a guard's whim, an earlier slight, or the wrong place in the road decided it. Then came the lie. The SS said the women were being transferred to Mittwerde. Mittwerde did not exist. From that false transfer, the women went to the chamber near the crematorium, and the SS burned their bodies afterward. Between January and April 1945, the SS killed about 5,000 to 6,000 women this way. The chamber reduced one line of prisoners, but another line kept arriving. Columns of women kept reaching Ravensbrück from camps farther east, including Auschwitz. The SS had already driven them west on foot as the Soviet advance closed in. The road killed first. Those winter evacuations lasted for days, sometimes longer, with almost no food and little shelter. Armed guards stayed behind the column. Thousands died from hunger, cold, or shootings before they ever saw Ravensbrück. Many who arrived could barely stand. There was no space. The survivors entered barracks already packed beyond capacity, where disease spread fast, and each new arrival cut the food ration again. By April 1945, with the front closing, the SS again pushed most remaining prisoners west on another forced march. Some never kept up. Women who slowed, stumbled, or collapsed were shot beside the road. On April 30th, Soviet soldiers reached Ravensbrück and found a camp nearly empty, except for several thousand women too sick to move. Germany signed the Act of Surrender in Europe 8 days later. By then, the cover-up had started. SS men dumped uniforms, burned papers, and vanished into refugee columns across ruined Germany. Some took false names, others simply went home and waited in silence. Some blended with civilians in the wreckage. Some moved through organized escape routes. Church-linked helpers pushed Nazi figures toward South America through what later became known as rat lines. Many others relied on distance and quiet. The trail stayed open. Ravensbrück had opened in 1939. British forces took the main role because so many prisoners had been British and Western European women. Many were French and Dutch resistance fighters, arrested and deported by the Germans. British investigators wanted names, not rumors. In summer 1945, the British War Crimes Investigation Team began interviewing survivors. Their accounts came from France, Poland, the Netherlands, Czechoslovakia, and the Soviet Union. They matched on guards, violence, and repeated behavior. No one had coordinated anything. That was corroboration. British prosecutors later folded the testimony into the Hamburg trials in 1946. Matching statements did more than outline the camp. They gave investigators names to chase. One of the first was Dorothea Binz, and her case was already moving toward the British Ravensbrück trials that would open in Hamburg in 1946. Authorities arrested Binz in May 1945 near Güstrow, only days after the German surrender. She was 25. Witnesses described her as calm, and she showed little sign that she expected severe punishment. Carmen Mori surfaced in Switzerland, and Swiss authorities handed her to the British. Her wartime intelligence ties drew arguments over whom she had served and what exactly she had done. The disputes did not erase the Ravensbrück evidence. Testimony about her conduct inside the camp stood on its own. Authorities detained Vera Salvaquart in Germany. Survivors connected her to the medical block, and several women gave close, detailed accounts of what they had seen there. Those accounts matched across separate statements. Several survivors identified Vera Salvaquart independently from the medical block. Those identifications did more than confirm one section of the camp. By late 1946, after months of questioning, British investigators decided the case file was strong enough for trial. The first Ravensbruck case opened on December 5, 1946. It opened before a British military tribunal in Hamburg. The proceedings sat in the British occupation zone, where Hamburg was already hearing several camp prosecutions. The charges formed part of a wider British effort to punish crimes against citizens of Allied countries. Many Ravensbrück prisoners had come from occupied Europe and the Soviet Union. Many were captured resistance women. 16 defendants faced the court. Binz was there. Mori, too. Salvaquart as well. Other guards and SS officers joined them, including men who had held authority inside the camp. One male defendant stood above the rest. Fritz Zuren had commanded Ravensbrück since 1942, tried to place himself in American hands after the war, and still entered the dock among the 16 accused. Once all 16 were seated before the British tribunal in Hamburg, the case narrowed to charges and personal guilt. Prosecutors tried them for war crimes, the murder of Allied nationals, torture, and inhumane treatment inside Ravensbrück. Names mattered now. Dozens of survivors took the stand, identified particular defendants directly, and described in detail what they had personally seen those people do in the camp. The tribunal was not being asked to condemn the camp in the abstract. It had to decide which accused had taken part in specific crimes. The defense answered with rank, orders, and dependents. Lawyers argued that the defendants had acted inside a chain of command, and that orders from above limited any real chance to refuse. For several female defendants, counsel pushed a second line and said they had served under male superiors, had not created the camp, and should be judged with that subordination in mind. Orders were not enough. Earlier that year, the Nuremberg judgment had already rejected superior orders as a full defense for war crimes, though it could still weigh on punishment. And the prosecution in Hamburg used that rule at Ravensbrück. Personal responsibility still remained in law. For this case, that meant a command from above could describe the setting, but it could not close the question of individual guilt. So the judges moved from orders to acts. They isolated conduct that, in their view, showed personal initiative inside the camp. Then came specifics. The court singled out Binz on one point. She made starving prisoners stand outside for hours in freezing temperatures, simply to deepen their suffering. It singled out Salvaquart for giving suspicious substances to sick patients who appeared to be recovering. Those acts mattered. On February 3, 1947, the tribunal announced its verdict. Then came the count. 11 of the 16 defendants were found guilty. Binz, Mori, and Salvaquart received death sentences, while others drew long prison terms. The court set the executions for May 2, 1947, at Hamon prison in northern Germany. The British used Hamon for post-war executions of convicted war criminals. The date was fixed. The final hours split 3 women apart. Dorothea Binz was 27 when they hanged her, and prison staff described her as calm, mostly unrepentant, still speaking about service to her country. That language came from Nazi ideology, and it never really left her. Carmen Mori never reached the gallows. The night before her scheduled hanging, she died in her cell after using a sharp object on herself. The exact details were never fully explained. The file stopped short of certainty. For survivors waiting for justice, her death stirred mixed emotions. She escaped the execution ordered by the tribunal, yet the suicide looked to them like one last confirmation of guilt. Vera Salvaquart went up beside Binz on May 2, 1947. In the months before that, she kept writing letters claiming she was innocent. The tribunal never changed its judgment. The letters did not stop. The verdict stayed. After the first verdict, investigators kept gathering and organizing evidence in 1946. British military tribunals then held 3 separate Ravensbrück trials between 1946 and 1948, under the Royal Warrant of 1945. They issued 16 death sentences, 14 stood. Mori's suicide removed one, and a later appeal reduced another. Several other defendants got prison terms from a few years to life imprisonment. A French military tribunal executed Fritz Zuren in June 1950. The verdicts ended the trials, but for many former prisoners, the next barrier waited at home. Tens of thousands had survived Ravensbrück and the death marches of 1945, while Europe still held millions of displaced people moving across the continent. Now, the barrier was private. Many women returned to countries that could receive them as citizens, yet not as witnesses. In France, the post-war story centered on resistance heroes, return, and liberation, and that left little room for years spent inside a camp. France had another script ready. In Poland and the Soviet Union, governments filtered wartime memory with care, lifting some stories and pushing others aside for political reasons. Some women met disbelief. Others met silence at home. Many learned that speaking brought distance instead of recognition, so silence became the safer choice. Some former prisoners waited 20 or 30 years before they spoke in public. Some testimonies survived anyway. A few Polish women carried Ravensbrück into court. Their case started in the ward. It ended in Nuremberg. SS doctors used them in surgical experiments at Ravensbrück. They copied battlefield wounds and infections. Then they watched the damage spread. Doctors cut open the women's legs. They packed bacteria into the wounds. After that, they tested treatments on them. No consent, no real choice. Help came late and almost never properly. The women later called themselves the rabbits, a bitter name from laboratory animals. Several of them testified in 1946 and 1947. Their words reached the Nuremberg doctors' trial. 20 SS doctors faced the dock there. It was the first of the 12 later Nuremberg trials. That testimony helped shape the Nuremberg Code. The first rule was voluntary consent. Patients and research subjects had to agree. No agreement, no experiment. The code later became a foundation of modern medical ethics. It still gets cited today. Court records were not enough. Survivors also had to fix Ravensbrück on the page, and Germaine Tillian did that earlier than most. Arrested for resistance work, she was deported there in 1943 after training before the war as an ethnographer and researcher. Inside the camp, she watched people, routines, and violence, then kept what she saw in memory when writing openly was impossible. After liberation, she produced one of the earliest detailed accounts of Ravensbrück, strengthening the record just as doubt and denial began to spread. Tillian died in 2008 at the age of 100, and France moved her ashes to the Pantheon in 2015. Today, the Ravensbrück Memorial and Museum, opened in 1959, stands on the campsite. The trial ended elsewhere. In Fürstenberg Havel, in northeastern Germany, the campsite remains under the name Mahn- und Gedenkstätte Ravensbrück. It opened in its post-war form in 1959. Archives remain there. It runs educational programs, and visitors still arrive from many countries. Most barracks are gone. The camp noise is gone. The place is quiet now, and the camp routine ended long ago. No archive folder and no trial record can replace the ground itself, because the crime happened here. From that ground, investigators moved to the guard lists and witness files. In public memory, Nazi camp violence still wore a male SS face. At Ravensbrück, though, the Aufseherinnen had moved past watch duty as the war went on, and their role inside the camp kept growing. After the war, those records placed female guards inside the violence itself, not beside it. Those files lead back to the site itself. In May 1939, Ravensbrück opened on Lake Schwetzee in a quiet corner of northeastern Germany, about 80 kilometers north of Berlin. It was built for women. By that year, the Nazis already ran many camps, yet Ravensbrück became the main camp for women the regime marked as enemies. Jewish women, political prisoners, Roma women, resistance members from occupied Europe, and Jehovah's Witnesses were all sent there. The category kept widening fast. Then came the label asocial. It could mean homelessness, or simply a relationship the regime did not approve. From 1939, SS recruiters kept it simple. They ran newspaper ads and pushed the openings through job offices. Young German women looking for work saw better pay than factory labor, plus housing, meals, and a uniform. For many working-class women under war hardship, that offer mattered. War shortages made the package attractive. The main gate was German birth and Nazi racial standards. No police experience was needed, no psychological checks. No background screening. Training followed, and the first course lasted only a few weeks. Those first weeks were thin. Later in the war, it got shorter when the SS needed guards fast. Ravensbrück opened in May 1939 in Fürstenberg, about 90 kilometers north of Berlin. New recruits stood beside veterans and watched the camp run. Violence came with a lesson. Beating prisoners was openly allowed. It showed who held authority. Guards who hesitated were pushed, and the most brutal guards were often rewarded with better positions. Hesitation brought pressure from above. About 3,500 women served as guards during the war, and most started at Ravensbrück. Women trained there, then moved on to camps and sub-camps across occupied Europe. The women there trained new arrivals and sent them onward. By 1944, around 150 female guards were stationed there at one time, controlling 45,000 to 50,000 women. Resistance brought immediate, violent punishment. Everyone knew it. That warning had faces. Among roughly 150 guards, prisoners from different countries later repeated one name almost word for word: Dorothea Binz. She came to Ravensbrück in 1939, 19 years old, a domestic worker hired to clean and cook. Within a year, she applied to become a guard. She kept rising. In time, Binz became Oberaufseherin, the senior woman over the camp's other female guards. The post placed those guards under her authority. The testimonies matched. Women from different countries described the same beatings, the same dog turned on prisoners, and the same hours in the cold, even though they had not compared stories after the war. Binz beat prisoners herself, regularly and in public. No pretext was needed. Witnesses also tied her to Edmund Brüning, a senior SS officer, and described both as indifferent to prisoner suffering. After the war, a British military court in Hamburg tried her in the Ravensbrück case. She made women stand in freezing weather for hours, even when the counting itself took only minutes. The court had already heard how one prisoner could become a tool of camp power. Carmen Mori went further. She was Swiss. Switzerland stayed neutral, yet reports linked her wartime past to intelligence work for both German and French services at different times. SS then made her Blockälteste. That was the senior prisoner in a barrack block. It put one inmate over the others, and it was useful for the SS. Prisoner controlled prisoner. The pressure stayed inside the block. Mori used that role on sick women in the infirmary. She beat prisoners who were dying and too weak to fight back. Survivors also said she personally killed at least one woman. The fear came from the contrast itself. She was one of them. She knew the hunger, the fear, the weakness. She still used her place to strike. That same infirmary leads to another name, Vera Salvacourt, a Czech nurse in the Revier. The Revier was the camp ward for sick prisoners. Officially, it existed to help them recover. In practice, guards sent there women already too weak for labor. Survivors said Salvacourt mixed a white powder into patients' food. She gave no explanation. Then the same result returned again and again. Women who received it often died soon afterward. Later, Salvacourt said it was only a harmless supplement. The testimony and the repeated deaths said something else. Women who received the white powder with their food often died soon afterward.